Hi folks, I'm Duncan Gill, child and adolescent psychiatrist.
And I'm Victoria Lee, licensed clinical mental health counselor, and welcome to Is There a Med for That? The podcast about teen mental health and behavioral problems and what to do about them.
Victoria and I have been working for years together with kids. Sometimes we use therapy, sometimes medication, sometimes we give some guidance to parents.
And sometimes kids just need to be left alone.
We don't have all the answers, but we probably have some of them. We'll do our best to share what we've learned over the years working with struggling kids and their families.
We hope you enjoy the show and we can be helpful to those who have taken on the hardest job in the world, being a parent.
Hi, Vicki.
Hi, Duncan.
What's going on?
Just hanging out here in the studio with you, having a good day, feeling lucky to be alive. Drove to the studio with Duncan today.
We survived, perhaps a near miss.
Yep. Duncan was telling me he's a really good driver. He just misses everything, including cars.
Mostly paying attention. Today was a little touch and go for a minute there.
Do a lot of doctors in general, like absent-minded professors, that stereotype? Is there one for doctors?
They all ought to go into psychiatry and not surgery.
Okay, good point.
No, I think most are more type A, very observant. So in most fields of, the more emergent fields of medicine, it's not a good quality. Right. It's funny, I was talking with my wife as an anesthesiologist recently, and I said, I could do that. She said, no you couldn't. Yeah. Because of the attention piece, primarily, yeah. Yeah,
because she's very focused and on top of shit, right? Like she's...
Yep.
Yeah,
she's right there.
Yeah.
Yep. And I know that all the time.
Yep, which is good.
Which is good.
She's the yin to your yang.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, or vice versa. Cool.
What do you want to talk about today, Vicki?
I wanted to talk about one of our core objectives in our approach to parenting, which is model healthy relationships.
All right.
So part of parenting, right, if you really think about, well, what the heck is a parent? Right? There's probably a lot of things that come up, but essentially you're taking on a leadership role, right? In your pack, your family, your group. And when we are working as counselors in our program with adolescents, we often think of ourselves as parent proxies.
Yeah.
So we know we aren't their parent, but how would a loving parent behave or interact with this client, this person, this individual? You can take it in a very like a clinical sense or even just like a spiritual sense of how you care for and unconditional positive regard for that individual. And being a leader in this role is really important because this dives into how do you really help someone, right? Because a big part of having kids is like, I think, right, is our responsibility to help them learn how to do whole like life.
That's right. And not be needed anymore as a parent.
Yeah, to become obsolete. And so we believe the best way to do that is to be a good leader, to model healthy relationship for them.
Right.
And that relationship, we believe a good leader does so by modeling. You lead, like you model good, healthy living for them. And kids learn a lot not by what you tell them. They might pay attention a little bit, but the big deal is what you do as a parent.
I actually did I did a presentation for my old residency, and I don't know if I made this up. I'd like to think I made it up or I stole it from someplace. I'm not sure. But 3 ways of learning, and the best way is to try and fail.
Yep.
And then try and succeed. So trial and error, very personal. So you touch a hot stove, and then you're done. You know what it is.
Yeah. Totally.
The second best way is to have somebody you respect show you, demonstrate. A parent touches a hot stove, and it's really to be a role model is the second best way to teach. It's not quite as good as learning everything yourself, but it's more efficient. It may be safer.
Yeah.
And the third way, and probably the worst way, is to be told what to do, and that's really the way lectures are set up. It's very efficient in the number of folks you can reach if you have a lecture hall of 500 people, for example. But it's no substitute for either doing or seeing somebody do. Right. And for parents, kids don't like to be told what to do anyways. But anyway, so I would say role modeling is short of a kid just living the wolf child, growing up on his own and just learning, hopefully surviving. Having a parent show them is better than being told. Showing's better than telling.
Right. I even think like when you're talking about like the stove and then going down that progression to then, seeing someone else do it. So you see their pain, maybe feel their pain indirectly, or be told that stove is hot.
Right.
I feel like I could feel it in my body that each step of the way, like number one is the deepest. Like I'll like that will be seared into my
literally.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. And I think the farther out you get from direct experience, the more dilute learning is. And so that lecture hall can introduce a lot of good topics to you. But I think fundamentally as humans, there's the quote, Joe would say it, I don't know where it's from, and you might have to think about it a little bit. To know and not to do is not to know. To know and not to do is not to know. Mm-hmm. So this idea that we can know something intellectually, like in the lecture, but it's not until we really do something that we really know it and can relate to it. And so really understanding the nature of learning and understanding how humans actually learn. I believe it's something incredible, like 90% of what we learn is learned through doing. It's not learned through absorbing the written or spoken word. Although primarily in American education, I think that's primarily how we learn nowadays. You sit, read, write. But we believe, so like, taking it out of schools, but thinking about it as a parent, it can be very seductive to go and say, hey, don't do this, and hope that they learn. And great, if you have a child who can learn to be healthy and well through just like words, wow, that'd be great.
You don't need this podcast
you don't
at
need
all.
This podcast. Enjoy, write us a letter. But I think the vast majority of kids and humans learn through observing in their environment and then through doing, like you said. I like those three that you laid it out. And we believe the first rule to leadership is to role model healthy relationships. And what do we mean by that? First thing that comes to my mind is being a humble, healthy person. And so when we talk about relationships, it's relationship with self, relationship with others, and relationship with the world.
Right. So
there's many layers to it. And your kids are going to watch everything you do, and they're constantly learning. And, we see a lot of times, I should maybe start with myself, right? Like sometimes, like say I like sweets, but I don't want my kids eating sweets a lot. Occasionally is okay. But if I can tell them till I'm blue in the face that eating a lot of sugar isn't good for you, but if I have it around a lot and I'm doing it a lot, that's what they're going to learn.
Or it comes to mind as the example of the parent who says a kid, you have to control your temper, and then blows up and starts, you can't, throwing things at home when he is angry.
Yep.
You can't expect a child to just listen to the word and not, it's not as powerful.
Yeah, and it brings it even back to like, say, a tantrum. You ever I don't know if other parents can relate as readily as me right now, but whenever can you remember when your child having a tantrum when they're younger, did you ever feel like internally like you want to have a tantrum?
All the time.
Right? And if you go down that route, you're not helping them regulate their emotions. Because what's happening is kids are looking to us to help co-regulate. By us staying calm, it doesn't stop the tantrum, but it can prevent it from continuing on longer. But if we jump in there and role model for them dysregulation, the likelihood of them it going longer is high.
Right.
And so thinking about teenagers in particular, there's a lot like what's going on with the teenagers that are really important to role model for them. And let's start first maybe with our relationship with them.
Right.
I think that's our number one opportunity with teenagers to role model loving relationships. And so how do you relate, like you said, are you going to be throwing things when you're angry at home, or if your son or daughter does something that's upsetting, do you snap at them? Do you apologize if you did something offensive? The way that the quality of your relationship with your child and the way that you interact with them is teaching them how to treat you, how to treat themselves, and how to treat the world. In our previous podcast, we talked about cutting and how sometimes kids who are brought up being abused or neglected will engage, are more at risk for engaging in self-injurious behaviors because that's been role modeled to them.
Yeah,
shown to them.
And the whole concept of the cycle of violence. If you grow up with domestic violence at home and your father beating your mother, it's no wonder that kids often repeat that pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not, you can even have the purest heart and say, I will never do that. Or think about maybe your own life and where areas that maybe you saw played out in front of you that you don't want to replicate, whether it's, domestic violence or unhealthy eating. You can say it all you want. I don't want to do that, but it's not just words, right? So how can you increase your likelihood of not doing it? Changing your behavior and also surrounding yourself with models of healthy behavior, healthy relationships.
Right.
And the modeling piece, so what do we want to model for our kids? It's the ideal, right? We all fall short, but I want to model total health and wellness for my kids, how to be a healthy human being that's functional, content. And that's a tall order. We're all going to fall short, but we think it's important that we put that tall order out there and we march towards it as a parent so that when we look back, we have the least regrets possible.
Absolutely. And I think we talked about this earlier as well, but the whole concept of apologizing, it's so hard for a child to apologize as they get older if their parents aren't able to do that. It's a very difficult thing to do, but you can just see in kids who we deal with, those who've had parents who can say, I screwed up. Yeah. And if not, kids have a real hard time doing that. They just learn that, or they don't learn that from their parents.
Yeah, and when you break it down to think about raising our kids to be healthy adults, functional adults, it's really hard to have a good relationship with someone who doesn't know how to apologize.
Right.
Because whether it's through accident that we hurt someone else, or maybe we did something intentionally when, in a bad decision moment, we all have to, we hurt just by the nature of sharing space with another human being. We're going to offend the other or hurt the other, and being able to apologize and repair that is essential. And so thinking about how do we model that for our kids, and we got to do it and do it with them, which can be very humbling for some of us. And once you get in the habit of it, I think it can actually be really fun and beautiful and wonderful and connecting. I know that, I apologize to my kids probably more than I wish I had to, but when things happen and I can apologize, often it's a beautiful moment of connection with my kids. My kids are only 4, 2, and 1. But it can be really a powerful moment of teaming up and reaffirming our love and commitment. But I know a lot of parents who it's really uncomfortable because, quote unquote, you're the parent and you shouldn't
make mistakes.
Yeah. And so modeling reality too, right? It's not, we don't want to, because I could see, I'm glad you said that, because I think when you put that model healthy relationships out there, we have to be authentic and real, right? And so we can have an ideal, and if we fall short, model how, because everyone's going to fall short, model how you handle that. It's always an opportunity to model something healthy, even in the most dire of circumstances.
I think it's tempting to think as a role model, you should always be getting things right because you're role modeling, but everybody screws up.
Yeah, totally. And I think the more as parents we are open to that, it's ironic, I think we do a better job parenting.
Right. Definitely.
It's kind of a funny paradox, but it's so true. Yeah. And then thinking about as parents ourselves, I'm not sure why this is coming up for me, but I think it's important to have other parents around whose parenting you admire so that you have some good models around. Because it's not enough to just say, I don't want to be like this. I think you have to decide what you do want to be like. Mm-hmm. And model that for yourself and all those around you.
As far as becoming a role model, maybe we did another podcast on this, but we talked about the control and authority. Do you want to recap that a little bit? Because really, it's gaining the authority that allows you to become a role model for somebody. They have to respect you. Yeah.
And so if we're seeking control over our kids, often they're going to reject us as a model for their future self, right? But if we're able to treat them as the autonomous human beings that they are, we're more likely to have kids who are going to grant us influence over their thoughts and feelings and who they want to be in the world. And so that really is central to being able to be a good model, right? And we think in general, trying to control your environment, trying to control others also leads to a pretty dysfunctional adulthood. And I don't like to hang out with controlling people. We're getting real, right? Like, that sucks. It's not fun. And so how do we relate with our kids in a way where they're willing to grant us influence, and not in a way where I'm trying to be their friend? I mean, I think we can be friendly with our kids. I'm not saying, I think some people say that as a, what's the word? Like they're insulting people and they say, oh, like they're parenting like they're friends with their kids.
Disparaging or
yeah.
Something.
Yeah. And I don't think, and we're not saying just be buddies with your kids, but be a healthy adult. Be a healthy human being and have a loving relationship with your kids. And I think it's, for some reason, this keeps coming up today too, this idea that, wow, what a tall order. Because often I think we want to be able to enter our little parent role and then exit parent role when we're not with our kids. But the type of parenting we're talking about is holistic. It's whole and complete, right? And so your kids, even though you think they don't know what's going on, they might not be able to articulate who you are outside of the relationship you have with them, but they're aware of it on some level.
Kids know everything.
They
on
do.
some level, they really know
Little
everything that's
radars.
going on.
Yeah, especially with their parents, because they're biologically designed to be in tuned and aware.
Right.
And so I do think this is a daunting commitment. It's insanity to become a parent, I think. Other than
What
it
a
helps the human race.
You made it 3 times in a row. I only did it
Beautiful
twice.
mistake. But it's what else is going to really ask you to do a really great job. You got to, and again, you just have to be good enough, essentially. I forget who came up with that. Good enough. One of the big names.
It begins with a G. Nobody can even check that. It's great.
Right.
Good enough fit, right? Good enough fit?
No. Thinking of good enough parent. So there's a concept in parenting that you don't have to be perfect, right? But you just have to be good enough to raise a healthy child.
Right.
Something. I don't know if it's like
you can look it up and you can say it on the next podcast.
Yeah. Good. I'll make a note
Maybe
of that.
Maybe a listener will call in.
And give us the right information.
Give us the right information.
We always need like one of those helpers. I always feel like a lot of other podcast people or radio people have someone there looking stuff up, telling them stuff.
How come Oscar isn't doing that for us?
Oh, we're going to have to get him on that. But good enough parenting. And so it's an ideal to be perfect, and no one's going to be this perfect parent. But we don't want to also use that as a way to let yourself off the hook and co-sign your own BS. Because I think we can do that. We can, as parents, if we don't have loving relationships in our life, if we don't respect other people in our life, how are we going to have kids how can we expect our kids to be respectful of other people?
I was thinking of something. Well, first of all, can we just give props to Victoria for one of the greatest expressions I've ever heard, which is co-signing somebody else's bullshit. I think it's great. I don't know where you got it from, but could you explain it?
Yeah, so
we hear about it a lot in our work, right? We see it.
Yeah. So co-signing your bullshit, and I heard that from someone a long time ago, and actually in recovery work, hearing about co-signing your own bullshit or other people's bullshit, is this idea of sometimes we come up with bullshit, right? Like, I think another word for it, just stuff that's not good. Like, it's not true. But something about human nature, we sometimes want to look for other people that would be like, like be like a drinking buddy almost.
Right,
with you.
right.
Like,
you don't have a drinking problem.
Right. Or like, oh, no, it's okay. Like, your kids aren't watching you, like, talk to those other ladies at the party or like whatever that like as a parent maybe isn't a healthy thing that you're doing or as a human being a healthy thing.
Right.
And so oftentimes we can look for people who will co-sign our bullshit, and we think a healthy, and it can be easy to do that because especially if you're an agreeable person, you don't want to upset someone. But we think that being a good friend, a good parent, a good, and I say good, but healthy is a better word for that. Being healthy is to provide clear reflection and help say, hey, like, geez, I don't know about that.
Yeah. So anyways, thank you, Victoria, for that. I also wanted to say there's some parents, probably role modeling is the single most important thing you can do. And you can not be touchy-feely, you cannot believe in psychiatry or mental health,
Yep.
or talk or think about any of these things. But if you act like a reasonable human being and you live with your children, that's more important than anything else. Anything else we really talk about.
Yeah, it's number one for a reason. And we have 3 different things we focus on trying to achieve as parents in our parenting approach, which we'll get to the other 2 eventually. But this is the first one. And it's there, I think Joe put it first for a reason, because it is so essential to creating that baseline of health and wellness in our family system. Is that and just like in our counseling program, we don't find counselors just based on credentials. We find healthy human beings. And that doesn't mean there's not imbalances or problems, but it's how do we relate to those problems? How do we work through those problems? Really important for our kids to see an active, healthy model of wellness.
Right. My father said one of his good quotes, I think, was, act like the way you want your children to act, because they'll probably grow up to end like just like you.
Yeah.
Grow up to be just like you.
Yeah. And what a gift in some way.
Right.
I know for me, that's a great motivation in my life to continue to be a better person every day, because if it's going to help my kids have a better life, I mean, what greater motivation than that?
Right.
I feel fortunate, when I have that positive lens of parenting on, right? Like you can really find the positive in that to help you do better and to dig deep, because it is, and it's really true that your kids they watch everything. They see it all, even when you don't realize it or don't think they are.
Yeah, even if they pretend they're not too.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, because sometimes, kids, it's a good point. Certain kids in particular, I think, are less outward about things, or are a little bit more private and reserved, and you might not think they're picking up on a lot, but sometimes those kids are the ones who pick up on even more.
Yep.
Interestingly enough.
And the kids, too, who are really oppositional and act completely opposite from you, still are picking up what you do. And sometimes they're not doing what you do just because they want to be contrary, but they're still internalizing it. It still matters.
Yeah. When you said opposition, I went to the parent, like maybe, and again, there's certain personality types that are just more disagreeable by nature constitutionally. But oftentimes, I can't tell you how many times in our program, and just in life in general, you hear someone say, oh, they're oppositional, but then you hear them yelling at the child, right? And the child yells back.
Right.
But when the child does it, it's different. See, and I get it. Like, you're the parent, so you want some respect for having that role. You're paying the mortgage. You gave up your life in many ways.
Bullshit. Really.
Duncan. Putting up with their bullshit is a good way to put it. But they're also putting up with ours, right? I mean, I remember being a kid, and sometimes I even try to put my lens on with my kids of like all the stuff about having to be a kid. If I have to get to work, you got to be ready, or I'm tired, but they aren't. They want to stay up, and I'm like 8:00 bedtime because I need to go to bed by 9.
Right.
So they got to put up with our bullshit too, and so we want a role model for them.
How to put up with bullshit.
How to put up with bullshit. Yeah. I mean, that's like, it sounds silly saying it, but that can be really a deep concept.
So you don't want to co-sign it. You want to put up with it.
No, and I guess it's good that we're gonna refine that statement. So we don't want to put up with it. We want to relate well with it. How can we healthfully relate with bullshit? By neither enabling it, by neither enabling it nor punishing it.
And that's gonna be one of our
we should do that one
podcasts.
soon, because I think it's really important to talk about that.
Yeah,
I think that'll be helpful. But role model healthy relationships.
Be a good role model.
And that's essential to being a leader of any kind, right? Whether it's for your kids. The world needs more good leaders. They need more loving, humble, healthy people
Big brothers
out there.
And big sisters and, yeah.
Big brothers and big... that's great. Well, thank you guys for joining us today.
It was fun.
It was a good one. Stay tuned for more parenting advice from Duncan and I.